Welcome to the MLB Slate Breakdown. I am Larry the Lobster. With me is Brent Hyden, taking a look at today's MLB Slate. How was your weekend, Brent?
It was pretty solid. Probably not as good as yours. It looks like you got a little bit of a sun yesterday.
I did. You could say that, yes. Instead of grinding out some Garrett Cole double-digit strikeout games, I took a nap in the sun, and I am more tilted now than ever.
There's a pretty stark contrast. We have bright red Jason and pale white me. It's blistering cold here in Oklahoma. It must be really nice for you to be able to fall asleep in the sun out there.
It is. It was pretty nice, but there is some downsides to it. But we'll get through it. I did have to turn brightness down on my camera actually. Decent slates here for bats more so than pitchers. It's not a good pitching slate, but I think we're going to find a few guys that we can kind of get behind as far as cash and especially GPPs. But it is an interesting one to kind of go through. No real weather concerns outside of the Philly Mets game, which is in New York, and as always, there's usually something going on with weather at least once a slate so far this year, and that looks like snow now. So with the Yankees game being postponed already, I'm kind of concerned with that Mets one.
Yeah, it looks like most of it should be, like, as far as the snow falling, should be done well before first pitch. It's just a matter if they want to try to, take the time to clear the field and get this game in. It's going to be blistering cold there, like in the 30s, so I don't even know if they really want to put in that much effort and trying to play that game tonight.
And because it's an interdivision game, they might just kind of postpone and go with it because they can make it up pretty easily.
Yeah, for sure. I will say there are some other windy games on today's slate, so it could make things a little bit more interesting.
Yeah, very true. Let's dig in here. Chicago and Toronto first. You and I just talking about this game. I feel like it's a little bit of a lopsided, Vegas numbers, but kind of in the wrong direction, or maybe should be a little bit even. Toronto big favorites here at home, big run total, but I'm especially buying it.
Yeah, it's a little bit interesting. I guess it all depends on how you view Reynaldo Lopez in this spot. I think he might be a little bit better than people are giving him credit for. We saw, especially in spring training, the dude was throwing some heat. He was peaking almost 98 miles per hour in spring training, which is definitely interesting to see. And he does have a little bit of stuff. I mean, his strikeout rates in the minors were pretty solid. And even when he was with Washington, he was striking out almost 10 batters per 9 innings. Didn't come to fruition last season where he was only striking out 5.66. But I think he has some excellent stuff. And I'm a little bit interested in him here. I think some of these Jays bats are going to be popular, especially guys like Justin Smoke. And if that's the case, I think I do definitely want to get some Lopez exposure, especially in tournaments where you could kind of hedge some of the chalk options.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like I like him here in GPPs. Like you said, the spring training stuff is very encouraging, especially because he does throw that fastball quite a bit. Looking at this Toronto lineup, like they are going to be a boomer bust team. You mentioned what was their strikeout rate for the first couple games here?
It's really high. Let me see. So far, and obviously we're talking small sample here because it's only a few games in, but so far this season they lead the majors in strikeout rate at 31.9%.
Yeah, and going back to last year, like adding a guy like Solarte in the lineup and like Diaz and Pilar, they're not huge strikeout guys, but like everyone else, like Grichuk and the top half, like those are guys that do strike out quite a bit.
Yeah, there are a decent amount of strikeouts in that lineup, and even like with Josh Donaldson struggling with his shoulder and things like that, and then you have Smoke who does strike out at like 23% of the time. Granderson strikes out a little bit. There's some strikeouts in this lineup, so I think it's a spot where, and especially at his price, where he could actually put up a solid outing.
Yeah, and like I said, if I was taking some bats against Lopez, I'd probably be looking at some of the lefties here. Like, I think you can take flyers on, like, Smoke and Granderson, but if they're going to be chalk options, like, I'm probably going to be looking elsewhere. Like, it is a huge slate. This Toronto team is so boomer bust, and there's a couple offenses that I do like more.
Yeah, there's several offenses that I like significantly more than the Blue Jays here. Granderson, you mentioned, he's fine. Lopez does throw his changeup a decent amount. Granderson, Grichuk do have decent power against the pitch, and Smoke and Granderson both kind of crush four-seam fastballs and in the range that Lopez kind of tosses. So they're worth one-offs, I think, if you're looking. Smoke obviously starting the season off pretty hot with 2 home runs yesterday. So he'd be about the only one that I would even consider. And I think he's going to be popular. I think it might be chasing a little bit.
Yep. Anyone else on that Toronto side that you like?
No.
Chicago side here, I have some interest. I'm not really looking at Garcia tonight. Are you?
No, definitely not looking. I will never look at a left-handed pitcher against the Chicago White Sox.
No, I'm definitely with these right-handed heavy bats, and obviously when you look at Delmonico, like he's a guy who handles lefties, as well. I like the White Sox here. Like the only thing that Garcia really has going for him is the fact that he does roll some ground balls. But outside of that, like I'm looking to load up on some of these righties, especially like Davidson and Abreu, and I don't mind going with a cheap error catcher with Castillo here, who does hit lefties pretty well.
Yeah, I should backpedal a little bit. I obviously Clayton Kershaw versus the White Sox is a little bit different story. So I will never look at a non like ace level left-handed pitcher against the White Sox. But
people were like, you could hear the people ready to hit their keyboards, like, oh my god, he said what?
I'm gonna start getting ads on Twitter here pretty quickly, but you mentioned these bats like Abreu, outstanding option here. He just mashes lefties with the 289 ISO last season. Avisail Garcia, solid bat, doesn't have a ton of pop, but he doesn't strike out very often. You mentioned Castillo. I do like him in the spot. Delmonico, excellent against lefties, even though he is a lefty himself. And we can't ignore Matt Davidson, Mr. 3 home runs, opening day, Matt Davidson. I love him in the spot. And you and I were looking so far this season, again, we're very limited, very, very limited sample size. But the White Sox right now this season are freaking just mashing the ball. Everything they're hitting is freaking is hard hit. But four of the top 21 batters so far this season with hard hit ratings are White Sox. That's Moncada, Davidson, Garcia, and Abreu. Even Moncada, like he's someone has so far this season. I guess if you want to use BABIP as a luck meter, he's been really unlucky. So even he is someone that you can look at here.
Yeah, and like even 2017 numbers like back up that hard hit contact rate for some of these guys, like especially against left-handed pitching. I mean, Abreu, over 50% as far as balls coming off 95 miles per hour or higher. Like that's an insane number. Abreu just mashes. Like I expect him to be maybe a little bit popular, but he's never as popular as what he should be.
I actually think he's going to be lower owned here, because there's a lot of really solid like first base options here today, especially with Smoke and Olsen and some of these other guys that we're going to talk about. Abreu could come in a little bit underowned.
Well, if that's the case, I'm all aboard. Like I love Abreu in these big slates. Like he's just a guy who has a ton of pop.
Yeah, and I don't even mind like Tim Anderson, some of these guys that are going to be batting lower in the order. Anderson, double dong game on opening day. He actually profiles pretty well against Garcia's pitch type. So he's someone that you could get exposure to, and he's really, really cheap across the industry.
Yep. Let's move on here. Philly and New York. Let's talk about this one as if it's going to play. Matt Harvey take on Ben Lively. I don't have a ton of interest in either of these two pitchers. Harvey's a guy who's been over the hill for quite some time. Has struggled tremendously with lefties, and this is not the place to really struggle with lefties here.
No, it's really not. And I don't know that I would say he's been over the hill. I think he still has the talent. It's just the dude hasn't been able to feel the freaking ball in his hand for 2 seasons now, because he has that nerve damage and had the injured shoulder and all that stuff. I keep on holding out hope that he's going to be able to get it back. And he showed a couple games last season where he looked really solid, but for the most part was just terrible. And I don't know. I don't think I would have any interest in him against the Phillies if this game plays. Lively's a guy, doesn't have a ton of strikeout stuff, but I don't know. He's showed some arm talent at least a couple times last season, had some solid games against the Mets as well. He'd be the guy that I might have a little bit of tournament exposure to, but like the Mets have been hitting the ball pretty well this season, so it maybe not worth the risk.
Like I kind of look at this, like the Mets lineup on paper can kind of look pretty meh, but like there's some scrappy bats in there, like, and especially once they get Conforto back, but that's down the line a little bit. but still a pretty decent front four. There's a good amount of power, like Cespedes and Bruce and Frazier. The only thing is, like, I don't really like bats in this game either, just because this weather is awful. Like, this is not going to be a hitter's paradise at all here tonight, just given how cold it is. But I don't really see a ton of upside with either of these two pitchers. I'm just kind of off this game, and I'm kind of hoping that gets postponed because I don't really have a ton of interest anyway.
Yeah, I don't really either. Like, if you're looking to get exposure, obviously with the bats, you're basically taking any of the Phillies at this point against Harvey, especially the lefties. Harvey gave up 2.68 homers per nine to lefties last season. So you're looking at Nick Williams, Odubel Herrera, Cesar Hernandez, Carlos Santana, who you and I were talking about. He's been mashing the ball this season. It's just been getting really, really unlucky. He's been mashing it like straight at people. So I think this is a spot where he could probably break out against Harvey. So I would be looking at those guys if this game even plays. And if you want to sprinkle in some Cespedes, some Bruce, Travis d'Arnaud is an interesting cheap catcher option. You could look that way.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely fine with using like a couple of them. They're probably more one-offs here. I don't think I'm going to be looking to stack.
Yeah, I wouldn't be looking to stack either.
Baltimore-Houston next game here. Chris Tillman taking on Charlie Morton. Let's start with the Houston side of things here. Good spot against Tillman, who I'm really just looking to fire away with Houston bats here tonight.
You can fire away with Houston bats every night. Like at this point, like you can just use them any night. Like just anyone in that lineup. It doesn't matter who it is. Altuve's been freaking hot as hell starting the season. He's 9 for 16 with 5 runs scored so far this season. Springer, Reddick, Correa, Bregman, Marwin is someone that I do have a lot of interest in here. He's actually pretty solid with a decent amount of pop against right-handed pitching. Everybody in that lineup is in play.
Yeah, they really are. Like, stack them up, use them as one-offs, like, do as you please. This ballpark didn't play too well last year, but, like, I think we're going to see a little bit of an improvement. Like, usually Minute Maid's a decent hitter's park.
Yeah, you got those what do they call them, the Crawford boxes out there in the field. Some balls could land out there, and the wind's going to be blowing out, and I think the roof is supposed to be open. So that could definitely help.
Yeah, I mean, definitely looking at Houston. I expect them to be pretty popular here against Tillman, so you're not going to fool anyone, but that's not going to stop me. No,
it's definitely not. And I think definitely like a one-off, very cheap value option would be Derek Fisher if he gets in the lineup. He's someone that you could definitely look at. Tillman, 35% hard contact to lefties last season, 1.63 homers per nine. He also struggled against righties, so literally everyone, but Fisher would be a decent one-off like value option to get exposure to.
Yeah. And obviously, even like Charlie Morton's in play here. There's obviously some upside against this Baltimore team, striking out quite a bit to start the year. That was the case last season. I mean, when you look at this lineup, you just expect like to see huge strikeout rates from these guys, and that's the case. I mean, there's only 2 guys that had a strikeout rate less than 20% last year against right-handed pitching. Sorry, 3, and that was Machado, Scope, and Jones. Everyone else extremely high.
Yeah, at this point, until they prove otherwise, I'm just going to be taking pitchers against the Orioles. I mean, you're getting like no hit through 6 innings by Kyle Gibson. Jose Barrios only gave up 3 hits. Gibson ended up only giving up 3 hits. They've only hit 1 home run so far this season. Let me double check that. I think it's 1 home run so far this season.
Well, it wasn't Scope or Mancini, that's for sure.
two home runs so far this season.
Jones and someone else.
Yeah. 28% strikeout rates. They're a 29 WRC plus to start the season. Just Morton's got excellent stuff. He's coming off one of the best seasons. He's coming off a career best season in 2017. Nasty curveball that he's throwing about 30% of the time. He's going to be chalky, I think, on FanDuel. You just load him up as your SP1 and move on because he's just dirt cheap. And even on DraftKings, just use him.
Yeah, I'm looking at him as basically the number 1 today just because I think there's a safe enough strikeout floor that he'll be fine. He just has that perfect combo that I kind of look for, a solid strikeout rate from last season, ground ball rate over 50%. Like, those combinations are very solid. And just looking at this boomer bust, Baltimore offense, like I see him possibly racking up a ton of strikeouts here. And even if he goes up a home run or a couple earned runs, like I think there's still a safe enough floor.
Yeah, and I mean the biggest issue with Morton last season was he didn't go very deep into games. I think it was 13 of 25 games where he only went like 6 innings, but like he was still putting up like 6, 7, 8 strikeouts in those games. So when you're leading off with almost a guaranteed strikeout in Chris Davis and you get off to a hot start, that's a ego booster for your starting pitcher. So just use them.
Yeah, I'm all board. Baltimore bats, do you have any interest here? Like I'm kind of just not looking to attack. Like I don't mind these guys as one-offs if you're looking to just kind of hedge against Morton, but I don't have a ton of interest just because I still like other options.
I don't even think they're good contrarian options. Like they're just not.
Alrighty, let's move on here.
Please.
Boston, Miami.
Can we skip this one?
I mean, sure, I wish we could. But, look at this Boston team here. We're getting like minor league pitching here in this game. I'm intrigued with the offenses. I have no real interest with the pitching.
I don't either. I don't know. Like Brian Johnson's weird. Like he had one game last season where he put up like freaking 8 strikeouts against the Mariners.
I remember that game so vividly.
But overall, like he just didn't have a ton of strikeout stuff. Like 17% strikeout rate on the season, 7.8% swinging strike rate, 36% hard contact given up. I don't buy into the numbers for him. He's pretty much only on the roster because they're dealing with a bunch of injuries. Like this Marlins team beat the hell out of the Cubs pitching staff in their series. And you and I were kind of talking like there's some decent bats in this lineup and people just kind of overlook them because they don't have a ton of name value. And I think part of what is going to be factoring into some of this stuff for the Marlins this season is these guys had to listen all off season long, like about how terrible they all were and how terrible this team was. And I don't know, that gets into guys' heads and they come out with a chip on their shoulder and they're trying to prove that they're not bad ball players. And some of these guys have some decent prospect pedigrees too. So I don't know that I want to target him, Johnson, and Richards. I'm sorry, I'm not going to touch a guy that hasn't even pitched in AAA.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think if you're looking at these Miami bats, like, yeah, I definitely like, Brinson here. And I think they're going to be overlooked. Like, maybe you get a few people who do round out their lineup with a name or two from these guys, but I'm definitely intrigued with like a Brinson. I don't mind Castro here. Although if I'm looking for more pop, I think I might go elsewhere at second base, but I think Castro's fine. Like you're probably going to see like Anderson, Cooper, Rojas, like these guys fill out. So if you need a guy from the back end of this lineup, I don't hate it if they're kind of the last person you put into your lineup.
Yeah, I do kind of like Lewis Brinson. He's got showed a decent amount of pop last season against left-handed pitching, 273 ISO, very limited sample size. But I do kind of like him. Even Justin Bour, 217 ISO against left-handed pitching. So I love me some Justin Bour. I think he's a very underrated hitter, and I think he is the best hitter in this Marlins lineup. I don't think it's anyone else. But even Castro is someone that you can roll out. I don't think people are going to target these guys, and I know they've been a pesky lineup to get through for the first couple games.
Yeah, for sure. Boston side, you mentioned to me before we started recording, you expect kind of a potential big blow-up game here for this Sox offense. Definitely coming. Obviously, they're a loaded offense. They obviously get some more pop with JD Martinez in the lineup, which that was an issue when stacking the Sox last year. There just wasn't enough power. You got Bogarts, who looks healthy, looks really good to start the year. Curious to see what their lineup is. Obviously, they're going to lose like a one of Hanley or Moreland, but I expect maybe like Martinez to play the outfield here if they're looking to do that. Like one of those guys is going to sit here, so you kind of got to see the lineup. But for me, like 1 through 7 is in play here.
Yeah, I think they're all interesting options here. I will say I think I like maybe a one-off of Devers, but him and Bogarts are two guys that I do have a significant amount of interest in this spot. But even I guess if JD Martinez gets in the lineup, you could roll him out. I don't necessarily mind him. I guess we're just gonna have to kind of wait and see. Even Nunez is someone that you could consider in this spot. I hate his position eligibility currently on DraftKings, but he's someone that you can roll out to just because you're getting someone with some stolen base potential and whatnot as well. So Bogarts, Devers, Betts obviously doesn't strike out, has plenty of upside too. You just kind of wait and see what the lineup looks like.
Yeah, I definitely don't mind Benintendi either, who I think will be probably the lower owned of these Sox guys because he just hasn't had that hard of a start to the season.
Yeah, Benny Goat's going to get it going sometime soon.
For sure. Washington, Atlanta, next one here. Tanner Roark taking on Sean Newcomb. Newcomb's got some talent, but I think I'm going to side with the Washington right-handers here.
Newcomb does have some talent. The problem is he doesn't have a lot of control, and he walks a lot of people, and that gets him in major trouble because he'll load the bases with walks and then give up like a two-run double or something like that. So I definitely don't want any exposure to Newcomb here, especially against the Nationals. I mean, last season they were solid against lefties, even though they do have some guys like Harper, who is a lefty, and Eaton and whatnot. I have some interest in Roark here, and it's mostly I don't necessarily want to pick on the Braves, but it's more about the fact that there's not a whole lot of pitching on this slate. Roark is a guy that did put up some solid numbers against the Braves in a couple matchups last season. Made some tweaks to the way he stands on the mound and his delivery that could lead to him being a little bit more consistent, coming off a career high strikeout rate last season. He's a guy that I might have a little bit of tournament exposure to from this game.
Yeah, I don't mind him just because there are such a lack of options on the slate. Like, I'm not expecting a huge ton of upside out of him, but you're kind of just maybe looking at him to get that quality start, potentially pick up a win here, and that would definitely be more than enough on this slate.
Yeah, it really is, and he made it in my pitching article today, and I delved into some of his other numbers and what he was doing on the mound to mimic some of the top aces. So make sure to give that a read.
Yeah, for sure. Washington bats on this side. Rendon and Zimmerman against lefties, like especially Rendon. Like, I love playing Rendon against lefties, and I'll be doing that here tonight. And I'm not going to be extremely high just because Newcomb. I would not be surprised to see Newcomb come out and throw a decent game here tonight. So I'm not going to go all aboard, but I definitely want to get some exposure. Same with like a Howie Kendrick, who's a cheap option. He crushed lefties last year, so I think I'm okay. And obviously, I don't like Trey Turner hitting fifth or sixth. That bugs me.
Yeah, it's kind of weird that he's hitting that low, but I mean it's working for this lineup. The Nationals lineup has been solid so far, so I mean if it's working, might as well keep it that way. So I wish he was batting up higher, but he's just not. But you mentioned Rendon, I love him in the spot. The biggest problem is like on DraftKings, I can't get Abreu, Davidson, and Rendon in the same lineup because third base only on for Rendon. But Zimmerman's interesting. Kendrick is a great cheap option. I think he's one guy that I do think I'll have as probably a solid one-off bat here.
Yep. Do you have any lefties like Harper catch your eye here? Are you going to spend elsewhere?
Probably spend elsewhere.
Yeah, I'm with you. Did you like anyone on this Atlanta side? Like, I'll always like Freddie Freeman here. But that's kind of it. Like, I'm going to look for some more power upside than like guys like Inciarte and Markakis here.
My biggest issue with Freeman right now is because Markakis is batting fourth behind him. Pitchers are just walking Freeman. Like, if you want to roll him out, feel free. He does have a ton of power in the spot. Inciarte, 9 for 22 with 2 doubles, a triple, and a homer versus Roark. So there's your BVP for the day. But no, I don't necessarily have a lot of interest in those guys.
Yeah. Dodgers and Diamondbacks here. I kind of feel like this is a make or break game on the slate a little bit here. Like, I'm expecting some Arizona bats to pop off against Ryu. I don't know what to expect out of Walker. I think we should dive into Walker here first, just because I think there's some upside here. If that velocity is true from spring training, the 2016, 2017, 2015, now 2018, like everyone's been talking, can we get a Walker breakout year? Increased velocity, humidor, although we haven't really seen humidor effects yet. Like, I'm intrigued with Walker here. Definitely a GPP guy only, but I do think there's some upside, especially if he is, going to improve this season.
Yeah, I actually put him in my pitching article as well. He was interesting last year. Like, he had some really bad home road splits. Like he was actually like a lot of his pitches were really good on the road and really bad at home. Some of that had to do with the way that he was able to grip the ball on the road as opposed to at home, and the humidor is supposed to help with that. I don't necessarily know, like we haven't really seen any pitchers talk about the pitching effect so far in Chase with the humidor there, so I don't know if it is actually going to change anything for him. But if it does, and he's able to actually get some improvements on his slider and curveball, he's going to be able to limit some of the damage that these batters are going to be able to do for him. And the Dodgers offense so far this season has been just pretty bad. Like I know they had a couple games last night. Bellinger knocked in a home run, and they had put up 5 runs against Derek Holland or whatever 2 nights ago. But you and I were kind of talking about it before recording. See, 2 of those runs were on an error, 2 of those runs were sac flies, and they're striking out a decent amount so far to start the season. So I have a decent amount of interest in Walker here as a solid tournament option and a solid cash game SP2, I think.
Yeah, I'm definitely okay with that. Yeah, my biggest issue, I think, with Walker is going to be the walk rate against lefties. That's kind of my concern. Just last year, he did limit damage a little bit. He was only at 311 WOBA. I know that's kind of been his struggle throughout his careers with lefties. But the walk rate, 10.6% last year. That's kind of my concern, just given the fact that there's going to be probably about 3 or 4 lefties in this lineup, and obviously you still have to deal with guys like Taylor and Puig. But yeah, they're definitely a strikeout rate. Like going back to last year, this projected lineup, 23% strikeout rate against right-handers. So definitely like Walker here. And then you and I not really digging Ryu. Just not a guy that I like to use in DFS at all.
No, it's really not. And one quick note on his walks: if the humidor does help his curveball, he did throw that 18% of the time to lefties, and if he's not able to grip it very well, it's not going to get a lot of command. So if he is able to grip it better in this park, then that should help a little bit with the walks. But on to Ryu, he's just not a guy that I have any interest in, and I think I'm going to be targeting the Diamondbacks here as far as some decent bats to get exposure to him.
Yeah, I am too. I mean, obviously Goldie against the lefties in play. There is a ton of first base options. And like you said, I guess now that looking at Goldie against the lefty on the slate probably does drop Ryu's ownership down quite a bit.
Yeah, it probably does. And it's one of those things. Goldie, obviously, if you want to get the BVP play in there, he's 9 for 21 with 2 home runs against Ryu. Started off he's hitless in his first 8 at-bats. I do expect him to come up with a hit eventually. He's a fine tournament option, I think. I have a ton of interest in our boy Nick Ahmed.
Yeah, I've always loved Nick Ahmed.
Podcast listener Nick Ahmed.
I mean, that was Sunday. I just was like, I heard Nick Ahmed likes to take naps in the sun. I was like, I want to be like Nick Ahmed, and that's what I did.
He's hot to start the season. It's 455 with a home run and 5 RBIs so far to start the season. He was great against lefties last year, 16.9% strikeout rate, 283 ISO, 488 WOBA. He's really cheap over on DraftKings. I have him currently locked in as my shortstop at 3,100. That's a solid price for him. So I think if you're going to get some one-off exposure, I would definitely start with him. And then Goldie, Devin Marrero, Pollock are guys that you can look at too.
Yeah, I agree. And then talking Dodgers bats, I think it's going to be Seager and Bellinger for me here. If I'm taking one-offs against Walker, possibly you can look at Grandal and GPPs, but I'm just kind of looking at the lefties as one-offs, and that's about it.
Yep, I agree there.
Later games, Texas and Oakland. It's way too early to have big sexy on a slate.
It's never too early for some big sexy action.
And I joked around because obviously we're gonna ace bats here, and then Bartolo's gonna troll us with 5 innings where he allows 8 to 9 base runners and 2 earned runs.
Yeah,
he's gonna pull a Jake Odorizzi on us.
I hope not. I don't know. He gave up 6 earned runs in 18 innings during spring training. Hopefully that continues and we get a solid A's game here because I have a lot of A's in my current lineup right now.
I do too. And we look and obviously kind of looking at guys who that are not thrown too hard. guys that hit guys that threw less than 80 miles per hour, pretty much all the A's.
Yeah, against Cologne's fastball range last season, Chris Davis posted an 814 ISO. Matt Joyce, 327 ISO. Piscotty, 400 ISO. Chapman, 286 ISO. Matt Olson, 783 ISO. That's a lot of power.
Yeah. I'm looking for some big upside, like basically those names that you mentioned now, like especially like the Olsons and Piscotty's and Davises. I really like a ton here. Great contact guy. I'm being sarcastic here. Matt Joyce will likely be leading off, which I don't hate. Like, I don't even hate that.
I love Matt Joyce leading off today. 252 ISO against right-handed pitching last season. Give me all that. And he doesn't strike out that much, only 20% of the time. So solid numbers, and he's fairly cheap. I feel like he's probably going to hit a home run to lead this game off.
Yeah, and usually, like, the A's, like, as a whole, like some of these guys like Davis and Olson, they do strike out quite a bit. But when you get guys like Bartolo Colon who are just not missing bats at this day and age, I'm all aboard. 87% contact rate last year for Colon.
Yeah.
So yeah. That sums it up here.
I do have another BVP play for our truthers out there. Jonathan Lucroy, 4 for 9 lifetime against Cologne.
Is Lucroy off the schneid yet?
Has he gotten a hit yet this season?
Yeah, that's what
He has 2 hits and an RBI so far this season.
All right, tides are turning.
Batting 167.
Yeah, I don't know how much Lucroy has right now. His career has taken a weird turn.
I think he's basically just relegated to being still like a solid pitch framer. That's pretty much it at this point.
Yeah, like, I don't know. I mean, I'm definitely interested in basically the entire A's lineup, though. So if I do come down, like, I don't mind using Lucroy.
He's going to have, like, a big game at some point, and everyone's going to be like, man, I wish I would have had him. And it could be today.
Yeah, it very well could. Obviously, no interest in Cologne, but Triggs I like here.
I put Triggs in my pitching article. I have a lot of interest in Triggs. He's a guy I think will go overlooked in the spot because people still like view the Rangers as like a very scary lineup. He's a guy who was better against lefties last season. And a lot of the scary bats in that lineup with Gallo and Mazara and whatnot are lefties. He has some decent ground ball stuff, not a ton of swing and miss stuff, but he's okay. I don't know. I do kind of dig him in this spot. Like, he has a couple pitches that could give the Rangers some trouble today.
Yeah, I mean, he does throw like that knuckle curve and slider stuff at decent amounts, decent whiff rates on those. Like, I have some interest here, and especially because Texas was god awful on the road last year. Look at the 29th in WOBA, 177 ISO, 82% WRC plus, and then a 26% strikeout rate. Like, definitely they were better at home. I like to target them on the road just because there are so many high strikeout guys. And you mentioned, like, Triggs doesn't have huge strikeout numbers, but I think I'm going to bump up maybe some strikeout predictions for him here just because of the matchup.
Yeah, I agree. And obviously you're getting a guy, like I mentioned, Lucroy behind the plate, a solid pitch framer. Triggs didn't give up very much hard contact, little under 27% on the season last year. Against lefties, it was about 29%, righties 25%. Just solid all-around numbers. Put up a solid game against him the last time they faced off, and that lineup's not really that much different except for Joey Gallo batting up higher in the order. So you get a guy with like a 30+% strikeout rate batting up in the order. That definitely helps boost your confidence going into the rest of that lineup.
Do you like any Texas one-offs here?
Gallo.
Yeah. I mean, that's it. But like for him, like for me, like he just kind of ranks like a little bit lower than everyone else. Like, I don't know if he's going to crack it over some guys, even at lower ownership.
Yeah, like I think there's a pretty big list of guys that I would have ahead of Gallo, even on like DraftKings, where he has, I think he still has he still has outfield eligibility. Like, there's still a laundry list of guys that I have ahead of him.
Oh, he's not like catcher today or anything.
Probably tomorrow. He'll be power forward for like the Spurs tomorrow.
Cleveland and LA here. It's a game it's weird because JC Ramirez, Mike Clevenger, two guys I kind of don't feel like picking on, but I could also see maybe like a Ramirez blow up just because like lefties hammered him last year, 45% hard contact rate. Like Lindor, Kipnis, Ramirez, Alonso, Chisenhall, even Encarnacion. Like I know he was better against righties, but Indians lefties here, man. Kind of a sneaky stack in the West Coast.
How are you going to look over Tyler Naquin?
Well, he's it's I never know when you're kidding or when you're actually serious.
He's the lefty.
Oh yeah, so is Bradley Zimmer.
I don't know. I don't have any interest in Ramirez. Obviously, you mentioned just really, really bad against lefties. He does have some decent ground ball stuff. No real strikeout potential for him here. I would be loading up on Ramirez and Chisenhall and some of these other lefties if you're looking for a low owned stack. Like these late night games generally do go lower owned, so I would be looking for some decent exposure there. Plus the wind blowing out about 10 miles per hour might help a little bit if some of these balls get lifted up in the air, but I do like them. I don't know that I'll be able to fit them in my lineup over some of the other stacks that I really like, but they're definitely a good low on stack here.
You don't think with that they can pepper that lower wall out there and right?
They might be able to. I forgot about that.
I mean, it could be something. And like you mentioned Ramirez, like good ground ball stuff, but 2.08 home runs per 9 to lefties last year.
Yeah, that's some solid numbers. Like Ramirez might be a solid like tournament pivot off of like the Chalk Altuve today.
Yeah, I agree because like I don't see a ton of these guys being super high owned. Like even a Lindor, I think Alonso's really cheating as like a value, but the problem is going Alonso over some of these other guys is very, very tough.
Yeah, I'm not going to go Alonso over like Abreu or Davidson or Olsen, but again, another solid tournament bat. Alonso is a pretty solid hitter. I don't think people give him the credit for the way he turned his like career around last season, but 233 ISO against right-handed pitching last season.
Yeah. I mean, if this was a different slate, then I'd be a little bit more inclined to use him, but like you said, I think for me, if I'm doing a stack, like he'll be in it, but that's kind of about it.
Yeah, he might end up being someone that I have exposure to on like FanDuel where I can use 2 first basemen.
Yeah, very true. Angel side of things here, Clevenger, obviously showed some stuff last year, like 27% strikeout rate. He's very wild, or right about 12% walk rate last year. I don't know about him here tonight. Like it's kind of almost a wash, like against this lineup.
Yeah, it kind of is. Like, I don't see a ton of strikeout potential in this lineup. I mean, less than 20% last season. They only have like Upton and Valbuena that like strike out a decent amount, maybe Martin Maldonado, but not a ton of strikeouts available in this lineup. That being said, I mean, dude had some nasty stuff. I think he's someone that you can look at in tournaments. I don't think anyone would really look at him. 10-4 though, I don't know that I want to pay that price over on DraftKings. Like I'm definitely not paying that price over Morton. FanDuel, a little bit different story. 7,700. He does have a little bit of upside at that price.
Yeah, and I mean, I think if you're looking late, like if you're playing a late slate, then Clevenger's more in play. That's kind of about it.
Yeah, this Angels offense though this season has been pretty darn solid. I mean, so far this season, 14% strikeout rate, 120 WRC plus. They haven't necessarily faced a bunch of good pitching so far, but I mean, yeah, late slate's probably a solid option.
Yeah. Do you have interest in Angels bats here?
Cozart's a little interesting just because he started off the season really well. If obviously Trout is Mike Trout. So if you want to use Mike Trout, feel free. I don't know. I might take a shot on Cole Calhoun here. Hitting. You mentioned that the lower boundary out there at Angel Stadium, it really does benefit a guy like him who does kind of pull a little bit. He might be a guy that I would have some one-off exposure to.
Yeah, definitely don't mind that. Colorado, San Diego, last game of the night. You got Mitchell and Bettis on the hill. This is a weird one. Like Petco Park here at night, like early on in the year, I'm not too intrigued with either of these offenses. I'd probably be more inclined to maybe getting some exposure to probably the Rockies side, but I still don't have a lot here.
I don't have a lot of interest in either bat or either pitcher, if we're being honest. Like Bettis over on DraftKings, just too expensive. I don't think he has a lot of upside. He doesn't have a decent. He doesn't really have any strikeout stuff. I mean, 15% strikeout rate last season. His swinging strike rate was 9.2%. So I don't necessarily see that going up. Obviously, the Padres not a very good offense. They do strike out a ton. Um, but I just don't see it with him. I don't see a bunch of upside in the spot. And the same goes for like Mitchell. Again, another guy without a lot of strikeout potential. Rockies were really bad on the road last year. Maybe there's a potential for him to put up a solid game here, but I don't know. He'd be the guy that I would maybe have a little bit of exposure to. In the spot. I mean, they did Rockies so far this season striking out like 31% of the time. So maybe there's a potential for him to put up as at least a decent game at his price as like an SB2 option.
Yeah, I think that's kind of like about it. Like, if you're looking to kind of stack some bats, like he might be a guy you can use and kind of hope for that 15 mark on DK at his price.
Yeah, I think he could get you there at that price. I mean, he's 6,900 or no, I'm looking at the wrong pitcher. He's 5,400 over on DK. So, I mean, he has a chance, but we're also talking about a guy that he was a bullpen arm last season. So
yeah,
I don't know how deep he's going to go into a game like this. I don't know that he's necessarily stretched out.
Yeah, and I mean, if that's the case, like, if these guys are only going to see him one at bat, it's kind of a different story. But he wasn't bad against lefties, like 70% ground ball rate against lefties. Like that's not something I really like to target. He's not a big miss guy. He did walk some guys, but it's just kind of, this is another one. There's just not much here. It's a bad ballpark. Like if you want to do a one-off on like Blackman or Arenado, like sure, go for it, but that's it.
Yeah, that'd be pretty much it. And maybe some Ionetta just because he's cheap. And yeah, catcher today is not that appealing. So maybe a little bit of Ionetta, but that'd be about it.
Yeah. Any Padres one-offs, like you mentioned, catchers are pretty weak. Hedges has some power against righties. It's not a great ballpark, but Bettis doesn't miss a lot of bats either. Like, I guess he's worth a look in GPPs.
Yeah, Hedges is a guy. He's just a power bat. Like he's either going to hit a home run or strike out pretty much. So he would be a guy that I might have a little exposure to. Watch the lineup. Will Myers may not make it in the lineup, so maybe that could move some things around and get another bat in there. But not really anyone that I'm terribly intrigued by in this spot.
No, me either. Home run calls. Who you got?
Matt Davidson is going to be my chalk home run call, and Matt Joyce my low-owned home run call.
I like it. I'm going to go Goldie. Home run for that's my contrarian. Just kidding. Contrarian here. It's tough. It's tough.
I'm starting to regret. Like, I actually have one that I really like now that I might want to go over Matt Joyce if you don't take him.
Throw it out. What do you got?
Lonnie Chisenhall.
Ooh, I like it. I was going to say Devers here.
Nice. I dig it.
So that's it for us. You can know DaveFantasyCafe.com. Brent brought to you the pitching article today. I'm on stacking. Cheat sheets and everything will be up later this afternoon. Good luck today, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Good luck.